I just show the debt all collective in one
Okay.
for easier,
Which that makes sense.
so you can.
All right. Thank you. Let's start the July 1st workshop. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Nordby is absent. Councilmember Woods?
Here.
Councilmember McKenzie?
Here.
Councilmember Schweer is absent. Mayor Monge?
Here. Thank you. I get a motion to adopt the agenda, please.
I'll make a motion.
So move. Councilmember McKenzie, second.
Second.
Woods, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you much. Topics.
Thank you, Mayor. We got one topic on the agenda for this evening, which will be our first kickoff 2026 budget meeting. Just comprehensive look. We've taken the time to meet with all the departments now. And I think at first glance and first look, we're trying to keep the levy around 6, which right now we are. I will turn it over to Finance Director Dan Winnick to discuss details.
Mayor, council members, so here we are. Tonight we get to start off with looking at the 2026 budget. You've got more information today than you've had in the past years. You have a whole comprehensive look at everything where we're at with each and every one of the budgets that we approve. So you're going to see the general fund, HRA, EDA. In your packet, you get to see all our enterprise, internal service funds, and special revenue funds. So you get to see absolutely everything where we stand today. As you can remember that we had a goal that was set by our city manager, Brian Frandl, that we were going to be shooting for a 6% levy increase and to hold our utility rates the same. So what you're going to see tonight accomplishes that. Kind of walk through how we got there. It wasn't easy, and there's a big reason why it wasn't easy, and we'll get to that when we start talking about the CIP, which you do have the 2026 to 2035 CIP, a part of this package too. So you're seeing absolutely everything in the package today. I have a PowerPoint that kind of summarizes things at a higher level, but our CIP is what drives so much of it. In the past years, we've really done an excellent job as far as planning, identifying needs that the city has, from streets to facilities to parks and so forth. When we look at that, right there to fund what we're going to see in the CIP, that's a 6% levy increase right there. That's not talking about all of the, cost of living and union contracts, or if you start adding staff or operational increases. So for us to come in at a 6% right now, taking into all those factors is quite an accomplishment. That really goes to the leadership. I'm not going to give the city council credit because you haven't seen it yet. It really goes to Brian Frandl for his leadership and all of our department heads because they put together their budgets and they all had to meet with Brian, and Brian drilled them on just about every single line item. Wanted to know what it was for, what it is, can you live lower, da-da-da, all the way through it. So it was quite an extensive process with all of our department heads. As a result, that's what we're going to show you tonight. So tonight we're going to just take a quick look at the budgets that the City Council approves. We're going to take a look at where we're at for the proposed levy for 26, the general fund, HRA, EDA, enterprise funds, internal service funds, other budgets, which are really our special revenue. Take a quick look at the 26 to 35 CIP, and then discussion. If there's questions that come along the way, please don't wait till the end, jump in, ask questions so we have clarification. There's a lot of information that we're going to be going through. So the budgets that are approved, there's the general fund, and that's really the primary governmental fund used to account for all financial resources, except those that are required to be accounted for in another fund. And a question came up earlier, that's where debt is required to be in a different fund to be by itself. HRA, EDA, proprietary funds, our enterprise funds, and other permanent funds that we budget. Our enterprise funds consist of the water, wastewater, electric, surface water, solid waste, and fiber optic. In our internal service funds are information technology, insurance, equipment, city mechanic, and the building maintenance funds. Other budgets that we have are the Community Center Fund, which is a separate fund, Community Event Fund, Fire Relief Fund, Park Fund, Street Maintenance Fund, and Asset Preservation Fund. You'll see those last three funds, Park, Street Maintenance, and Asset Preservation, they all have a levy component. And that's, again, it's a part of being able to have a dedicated levy to be able to afford our CIP, our capital improvement plan. And so it's going in for parks, goes in the Parks Fund, Street, that's what's helping us pay the pavement preservation and also our street reconstruction. We do a 10-year look at that. And then the Asset Preservation Fund, which is really for our facilities. So, like I said, our city manager set a goal. It was a lofty goal for us to hit a 6% levy increase and no utility rate increases. Good news, what I'm showing you tonight achieves that. So I kind of want to take you into the middle part there where it says levy components. So I look at that there's 5 components that are a part of our levy. There's the general fund, and that's really funding all of the departments that are within the general fund. So you're going to see fire, police, finance, administration, community development. You won't see the enterprises in there. They're all separate. So when you see water, wastewater, and those are a separate fund. This is where our levy is at. If you look across for what it was in 25 to 26, it is only increasing $28,000 or about 0.5%. You have to take into consideration that there was a cost of living of 4% per the union contracts from 25 to 26. In addition, there can be step increases and so forth. And we still were able to get it to a 0.5%. Street maintenance, that's the amount. It plays off. If you remember when we built a 10-year capital plan, street maintenance and debt work the same, or work together, I should say. What our plan was that when we instituted it 3 years ago, we had a debt payments of about a total of about 1.4 million. The concept was to keep that steady at 1.4 million and start to dedicate a levy amount to the streets. Last year it was 3.5%. If debt goes up, which we did in issuance, then the amount that goes to street maintenance goes down. But over a 10-year look, we were able to afford everything that was in our street plan. Parks gets a dedicated amount. I think they were at about a 0.55% levy. And then asset preservation, if you remember last year, after we got more of a comprehensive look, especially when we got the facility assessment done and looking at our needs that were in there, we ended up having to bump that up to 2%, which resulted in the $142,000. So if you look, our city portion of our levy is going up $466,000, or an increase from last year of 6%. Again, if you take all those other levies out of there, we would have only had a 0.5% increase. HRA and EDA right now, we're leaving them the same as we had. So if we take all three of those components together up on the top, we'll see that we're at an aggregate of a 5.84% levy increase year over year. Not bad. I will be presenting, I think in September, I will present the EDA to their budget to hear if there's any comments or questions that they have. HRA, we've kind of left flat, and part of that reason is right now what we're doing in the HRA is a very good program, the student-built housing. We have ample cash in, available in that fund to be able to fund it, and then we're ending up selling it. We pretty much have been at a break-even point, so we're not depleting that fund. So there really isn't a need to increase levy dollars for that. EDA, so far, at least in the past 3 years, has not used all of its levy, so it's accumulated a little bit more. That may change a little bit moving into the future because, as some of your members, I know the mayor, you sit on the EDA, that you've started a new facade improvement program that may drop it a little bit depending on how many participants put in applications and get approvals for utilization of the facade improvement plan. Right now, I think we're pretty good, something that we'll probably end up having to look at in years to come, especially when there's additional programs that come up. But right now, we're sitting at a pretty good position as far as where our goal was set. Doesn't mean that City Council's in agreement with that. That's for you to decide. To achieve that 6%, like I said, we had to make some changes, and again, it's been our city managers and my approach in these budgets to be full disclosure, to tell you how we accomplished something. And so how did we do that? If you remember last year, we transferred, the City Council approved to transfer penalty amounts from the electric fund to the general fund. We're continuing that. Again, that's, contingent upon the City Council agreeing with that. But for us to get to that 6%, we had to transfer that, so we have a transfer in of an additional $131,000. The Emerald Ash Borer program, right now the plan is that there's about, I think after this, there's about 3 years of funding that's available. We've been funding that out of levy dollars, out of the general fund. It will go away someday, and then you would realize that savings or drop in your levy. We're taking that now, and then the next 3 years will be funded from the Asset Preservation Fund itself. And then we started last year reducing some of our enterprise funds, the transfers from water, wastewater, and surface water. It amounted to just under $65,000. We're reinstating that. Again, any of these components can be changed by City Council, but it's just kind of showing you how we ended up getting to where we're at. Those three amounts total $287,000, or reduced our levy 3.7%. That's how we ended up making us to get down to that 6%. And roughly when you're gonna see some of the breakdowns, especially when you look at general fund, you look at personnel costs, that 3.7 is pretty much what the personnel costs increased. Again, there was a 4% cost of living, and then there's step increases that. So we'll go to the next slide here, and it really kind of depicts what the city levy changes for 2026 are. And that's where you're going to see total personnel costs increased approximately $300,000 at 3.84. Again, pretty close to that 3.7 that we ended up having to cut on the previous slide. If you look at our supplies, contractual services, and capital, we've actually had a decrease of $337,000. A lot of that is really from the community development side, both on a revenue side and on an expenditure side for inspections. If you remember, I think Brian, last year was our first year with a new contractor. Rum River, so we switched over. And at that point in time, we switched our rate structure. It used to be more based on value of a project. It went to more of a flat project fee. So, like a roof. Roof now costs, permitting is $125. You add in some of the others, it comes to $146. Each and every single roof is the same. It saves residents when they're doing projects. They're not having a big bill or a permit fee based upon the roof project or the value of the roof project. But what that does is it reduces our income, but it also reduces our expenditures. And so we're adjusting that down. Again, things could change. If you remember back 3 years ago when we ended up having a pretty sizable hailstorm. All of a sudden, permitting went way up. So what I do is, based upon the contract, I use a percentage of revenue and expenditures, and we do make some money off of having that to cover a lot of our operational costs of our community development staff that handles all of those transfers. There's a $20,000 reduction. Last year, we had a $20,000 transfer from general fund that went to the community center. I don't have that in there right now. I don't know what the decision is on the community center, but we will see later on that the community center will need a transfer. The community center is not a levy fund at this point in time. It is its own enterprise, or not enterprise, proprietary fund. The concept behind it was that you would generate revenues from activities happening in the community center that would then offset the expenses. So there is not a levy component except for this $20,000, which we've removed this year. Again, that's something that we'll end up having to discuss how we're going to handle that down into the future. And then all other revenues, there's a reduction of approximately $87,000. And again, the biggest component of that revenue reduction is what I had explained as far as permitting fees and revenue. So the general fund, again, has a levy increase of $28,000 or just under 4%. Not bad. And then you can see where the infrastructure, that's really where it's driving things. The street levy increased to 0.7%, parks 0.6%, and asset preservation 1.83 from last year. Debt increased 2.5. That's where that new debt issuance that we just issued in the spring, the impact that has. And then, so if you added those up, it comes to $437,000 or 5.63%. You add those two together, and that's where you get the 6%. So you get to see the full breakout at a very high level from a categorical standpoint. As far as levy is concerned, this kind of gives you an idea of what debt we have that gets paid out of the general fund. And there's a 2014A, which we refunded and refinanced in 2021. There's a 2016, two components of that. One of them, the abatement part to it, actually gets paid out of the park fund because we give some of our LGA money to them, and then in tune they utilize that to pay their debt payment for their portion of Casey Lake. There's 2017, 2018, 2020, 2022, and then the newest one, 2025. And so that's really where the increases come to. Our debt service went up $194,000. $185,000 of that is due to the new bond issuance. So when we take a quick snapshot look at our proposed general fund budget and we look at it by revenue by category, I think you can see something very striking. And that is there's a big green portion that's over half. And that's property taxes. That's the burden that we're putting on our residents here through the property tax system, and it amounts to just under 57%. Another big portion that you're going to see is over to the left-hand side. It's gray. It's intergovernmental. and you see it's at 2.1. We collectively get a little over $1.6 million for local government aid. We break it up in three components. A little bit of it goes to the park fund for that Casey Lake. A little bit of it goes to, I think, our streets, but the majority of it is in our general fund. It's important to keep an eye on that local government aid from the standpoint that a number of years ago there was a lot of talk that local government aid was going to be dwindled down, and then all that talk stopped. This past legislation, there actually was talk again to reduce local government aid. And that can have a great impact. It didn't happen this year, but we have to remember, and had kind of shared a little bit with you, that the last projections that I've seen on budget deficit for the biennium for the state of Minnesota for 2028 to 29 was like a $6 billion budget deficit. So in this legislation, they were trying to make some cuts in certain areas to kind of get themselves ready for the 28, 29, which is going to be a tough one. So if projections, and they do change all the time, but if they were to come out to that, you more than likely will see coming up a reduction in local government aid. Now that's going to have a direct impact on us because we're going to lose something. And just kind of like for a magnitude type of piece. If we were to lose 10% of our local government aid, that's $160,000. There's over 2% levy increase just to make up that revenue component to it. If we lost more, we would lose more. But we also have a tenant in one of our facilities, and that's the Ramsey County Library. Ramsey County gets, I think, well over $20 million of local government aid. If we get cut, they're going to get cut. And so and normally at the county level, they lose the funding, they don't lose the mandates. And so they end up having to find some other ways to make those up. Part of it can be a property tax levy. Some of it's cutting different services. Had heard actually today, and I haven't had an opportunity to look at it, in our department head meeting, it sounded like there possibly could already be like a freeze that Ramsey County has put on, kind of a hiring freeze. So, things are real, and it can be reductions not just at the state level for the county, it can also be at the federal level. So we need to be kind of aware of that. But what you can see on our revenue side is that we have a heavy, heavy dependence on property taxes and intergovernmental, to the tune of, what is that, 78, 79%? That's huge. So we need to be aware of that. When we look at categories for our expenditures, you're going to see the biggest component, and I don't think it's any surprise, in our general fund is personnel, and that makes up 69%. General fund, when we're looking at our budget, again, from year over year, both revenues and expenditures decreased $58,000. Again, you're going to see on our expenditure side, well, you'll see up in the revenue side, you'll see where that permitting went down 182,000. That's, again, that's the change in looking at our permitting, Rum River and component, and looking at it from what we've done in the past. So actually what I'm proposing is what we've got actual for 2024. Again, it could go up, could go down. But then so will the expenditure side to it. So we're playing a conservative approach of looking at our permitting. If you look down below, you're going to see that personnel costs go up, and it's, rounded to just no decimals, it's 4%. It was about 3.8. But all of our other categories, we've decreased. If we look at it by department, which is another good way of looking at things, you're going to see that two of our departments that take up a significant amount of our general fund funding is the police and fire and code enforcement. So our public safety, when we look at that, police is at 47%, We have fire and code just under 16%. You add them together, that's 63% of our general fund is for public safety. Again, this just shows what the graph shows, but you get to see all of the numbers. And you'll see that pretty much across the board, there's decreases from inspections, street maintenance, urban forestry, general parks. You're seeing a lot of decreases on our expenditure side to it to be able to make this budget. And again, a lot of credit goes to the department heads. This is really the second year that they've been requested to really tighten their belts, and I think that they've responded very well. HRA and EDA, again, kind of simply with that we've leaving the HRA the same, we're leaving the EDA the same. Kind of gives a little description, and I know you all know kind of what their, the purposes of those two levies are for and so forth. Enterprise funds, going to kind of give you a walkthrough high level of everything. So water fund, revenues of a little over 2 million. There's a decrease. Again, a conservative approach. Looking at last year, we had a real big reduction in our revenue on water just because of the usage. And so we've adjusted that downwards. Again, if we have a nice hot summer and people are utilizing more water for their lawns and so forth, our revenue could go up higher than that. But that's where we're at right now from our projection. The budget increases $595,000, but $538,000 of that is due to capital. It's what's in the capital improvement plan. That's why I've kind of been saying year after year after year that capital improvement plan is what really drives our budgets. And you can see it that there's a 6% commitment to be able to fund that on a levy component to it, but it also impacts other funds because there's equipment that needs to be replaced. Overall revenue and expenditures, we should still see a fund balance increase of about $100,000 in the water fund. Wastewater fund, revenues pretty much stayed the same. We're at about $2.7 million. Our budget's at 3.1. We're seeing an increase of 992. Don't get alarmed. 853,000 of that is again capital. Again, you'll find that same number in the capital improvement plan if you look at the report that says, funding sources. You'll see those tie out. And so they would see a decrease in their fund balance, which, is all part of our plan. Electric fund, we're seeing, again, last year we had a decrease in our revenue. And so we've made our adjustment on our revenue side to it. So it's about 11.7 million revenue, decrease about 243 from what we had budgeted in 2025. The budget amount is 11.5 million. That's a decrease of 682,000. A lot of that, it'll show a $560,000 reduction, is just from the contractual service. So we pay a lot to MMUA as for usage. So if the revenue goes up, the expenditure will go up, but we still make a profit off of those. So they kind of tie together. And so we reduce the revenue, we reduce the expenditure on the side to it too. Still shows that the fund balance will increase almost $200,000. Surface water, virtually the same revenue as we had in 2025. The budget's increasing. Again, of that $356,000 increase, $246,000 again is due to capital increase. And then there's some increase, again, you'll see in debt, because remember, we increased our debt for this street project. Solid waste, we're pretty much, again, revenues pretty much stayed constant. The budget's increasing $103,000. You're seeing the bulk of that increase is in contractual services. And that's really a number of years ago, about 3 years ago, there was about $650,000 that was in the fund balance of solid waste. There's not a lot of capital that's spent on the solid waste, really just for garbage cans, recycling cans, and so forth. And so the decision was not to increase that rate that we're charging our customers and trying to draw down that fund balance. We will be going out for an RFP. If you remember, about a year ago, we brought an amendment that we exercised with our current vendor for 2 more years. We'll end up having to go out for an RFP this next time. Maybe the same vendor, maybe a different vendor, but at that point in time, we would look at adjusting the rate. At that point, after we get all the proposals, bids in from contractors. So this will show the way it's budgeted that there's almost a $200,000 decrease, and again, that's part of that plan of drawing down that fund balance in our solid waste. And then fiber optics. What we're seeing in fiber optics is our revenues decreasing almost $29,000, and the mayor's already on the edge of his seat, is decreasing almost $29,000, and that's due to the libraries have made the decision to get off of our fiber. Our budget is a slight increase, and that may be even adjusted moving forward here, and that's what we pay for fiber maintenance. There's a contract with Zayo for that, and I believe could be even higher than that. Brian and I will be looking at that. So it shows an increase of $74,000, but if you recall, we got a $2 million negative fund balance. So with a $29,000 reduction in our revenue side to it, I think we pretty much have guaranteed ourselves we'll never pay off that $2 million, that negative. So at some point in the future, you will have to find money somewhere else to make that fund hold, because you can't have a negative balance forever. So that's kind of where we're at with that. Mayor, don't say anything. Our internal service funds, we have the information technology, our revenues. So in our internal service funds, so the kind of the difference between an enterprise fund and an internal service fund, revenues from enterprise funds come from outside sources. Revenues from internal service funds come from within. So in other words, these 5 internal service funds, we charge out to all of our different departments, enterprise funds, and so forth. We've left the revenues the same, so we haven't changed what we're charging our departments. The budget has increased about $47,000, and I know the mayor's gonna love this one too. A component, there's 2 components. One, guess what increased again this year? Metro INET.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
What?
Metro INET.
Metro INET.
IT.
Our IT. I think it's now up to $390,000 is what they're proposing for the 2026 budget. As a reminder, when I came here, it was about $221,000. And this month, a little bit later this month, I'll have been here for 4 years. So that's quite the increase component to it. The other part to it, that's an increase in there, and you'll hear about that later tonight at City Council, is for an HR payroll services system. So we had to increase the budget for that to be able to cover that contract. What does it do in the information services? It decreases the fund balance $64,000. At the end of last year, we were at $280. So if you take the 25 budget, 26 budget, that's $81,000. We have enough in our fund balance to cover the 2 years. Insurance revenues increased a whopping $4, and our budget increased a whopping $4. So basically, there's no change in the fund balance where we're at. At the end of 2024, we had $198,000, just under $200,000 in our budget, or in our fund balance. Both this current year budget and 26, I have no changes on the fund balance. The equipment fund, and this is where all of, anything that's in the general fund, all of their equipment and everything gets paid out of this fund. Revenues are the same. The budget of $602,000 comes from our capital improvement plan, our equipment replacement schedules. It would decrease our fund balance $64,000. The fund balance as the end of last year was $3.4 million. But there's a footnote with that 3.4. Is it? No, we're actually at the 3.4 million. There's a footnote on something else. So we're at 3.4. But you're going to see later on that everything that we have in that capital improvement plan, we'll go through that. And we're also going to have to start increasing our allocations to our departments by about 5% a year. And so we'll talk about that a little bit later when we get into the CIP. City Mechanic Fund revenues and budget are the same as 2025. And we have a fund balance of about $52,000. Building maintenance, the revenues are the same. Budgets increased just a slight amount. It increases our fund balance about $70,000. Our fund balance at the end of last year was about $208,000. Other budgets that we have, community center fund. This is where I kind of talked to a little bit before. Right now, projecting no revenues. We will need about an $85,000 transfer from somewhere. That'll be something that we'll end up having to discuss and talk about moving forward. But there's still a lot of decisions that need to be made on the community center. That's with a budget of about $97,000, the same as we have in 2025. So we had about $90,000 left in 2024. You can see that, if you add up the minus 77, the minus 97, that's where that $85,000 is going to need to come from. So we right now it's not funded. We wouldn't be able to do this. We have to transfer something from somewhere. Community event fund revenues are the same. The budget has increased a little bit. It's a decrease of fund balance about $15,000. We've got about $59,000 in our fund balance at the end of the year, so we're okay where we're at right there. Fire relief is basically a transfer in and out. We get revenue from the state of Minnesota as in the form of fire aid, and we have to give that money out to the Fire Relief Association. So it's pretty much just a neutral budget, but it has to be captured in its own fund. And then we have the park fund. We're estimating revenues of about $332,000. That's an increase of $46,658. That's the levy component. That's so that we have a levy that we do for our park system. The budget's at $748,000. $681,000 of it comes from our capital improvement plan. There's also you see that $65,000 transfer. That's what I was referring to as their portion of the Casey Lake bond debt that they pay for. Fund balance decrease of about $415,000. They had $704,000 at the end of last year. Street maintenance fund, we get revenues of just under $1.6 million. That's an increase of about $533,000 from 2025. A large part of that, what you're going to see is really coming from, we got two different components. We're going to start to receive the biggest component is that we're going to start to actually get money from the MSAS program. If you recall, when the city made the decision to build the Sentinel building and they did the roads right there by McKnight and 7th Street, we borrowed about $2.6 million, and so we've been repaying that. And so this year we'll have full repayment of that, and we get approximately about $460,000 on an annual basis.
In return?
Pardon?
Return?
In return?
For that 460 on a return basis? Or is that?
That's about what our annual right now has been, but we just haven't actually received it because we took that loan out. So it's been removing or lowering that debt, that loan, and so it'll be paid off this year, so we'll receive it in 2026. And then the capital is what's coming out of again, the capital improvement plan. So this will show a decrease in the fund balance of 1.1. We had a decrease in the fund balance of 1.1 million. We had 3.4 million at the end of last year. There is a change that needs to be done here, and you're going to see the next fund, the Asset Preservation Fund, that we do need to, again, it requires city council approval. If you remember the ARPA funds, the $1.3 million funds that we received, and last year city council approved the use of it for public safety. And so we had parked that money in here in street maintenance. It really needs to go over to the asset preservation to be able to fund that. This street maintenance plan, it wasn't earmarked with that. It'll be okay for the 10 years as long as we keep levying approximately 3.5%. We'll be able to fund our street maintenance program. But the asset preservation will not be able to fund all of the needs unless that transfer takes place. That'll be something that'll be brought as a separate item to the city council for approval later on. We just, if you remember, we parked it in street maintenance at that point in time with a decision to be made later on by city council. So just for your awareness. And then you'll see in the asset preservation, and you can see clearly why. It's got a fund balance of 1.7 million, and what's been approved in 25 and what's in the CIP for 26, totals almost $3 million. So needs a little help, and that's where that 1.3 million will need to come from the street maintenance component to it. So I'm going to stop right there. There's a lot of information, that's all of your budgets that you approve at a very high level, and just kind of, any questions and thoughts of where we're at right now?
So the library's moving on to some other fiber then? Is that what is happening?
Correct. City manager, you want to?
Yeah, the county actually has their own fiber system. Prior to this, the libraries had come on to the city fiber. I think they had, correct me if I'm wrong, less restrictions with our fiber than some of the things that they had over there. So it just was a better fit at this point. I think they're being pushed because due to future expenses and costs that they can see coming down the road as well, they're starting to tighten their belt a little bit where they can, and so they're going to be going on to their fiber now.
You're renting out to people, or if you're, doing things, you don't know how long it's going to last.
Now, part of the calculations that, that Dan and I figured out, a lot of it, Dan, he brings up really good points. I mean, he's really got a good 10-year outlook for the CIP now, which is critical. As you've seen in our SIP, we have the next 3 road reconstruction projects, but it kind of stops there. So we need to continue those conversations and consider those costs. There are some unknowns coming our way that Dan kind of touched on of, we don't know what's going to happen with the state fiscal budget, come 2029. We don't know what's going to happen with the community center for sure just yet, but these are some large expenses that could really hit us hard, especially even with the LGA and other costs. So trying to tighten our belt up a bit now to in a little bit of anticipation of some of these things that be coming our way.
Other questions, thoughts to this point?
Last year, how much did we receive in tax disparity?
In fiscal disparity, you're going to make me go look?
Yeah, I didn't see it in there.
I think about 1.3 million-ish, somewhere about there.
And if we would have raised our levy last year, roughly $131,829, how much would that have increased?
It's not that simple.
I know,
Yeah, it's not, it's,
rough guess?
I, really don't want to wager a guess. I'll just shoot out maybe 50,000. And so much of it's dependent on, we're going to see, and I anticipate that we'll see some sort of shift. And I haven't looked at all of the numbers from the assessors. But there's been article after article, just because of the vacancies in downtown St. Paul area, as far as commercial properties are concerned. So if they valued them downwards, that's going to shift that whole, and they're going to have a big impact. And so is the city of Minneapolis, because it's, it's a metro countywide program for fiscal disparity. So there could be a negative impact to us. So that's what's harder to tell this year than regular. But I'd say maybe about 50 if the other things didn't change.
The reason I'm asking this question is I'm trying to figure out how much benefit there is for our residents if instead of transferring the penalties to the general fund, if we levied for the same amount of the penalties, but then refunded those penalties to our residents. Because right now, we're going to transfer $131,000 of penalties people paid into our general fund. But the more we levy, the bigger amount we get as a city for fiscal disparity. So if it's a $50,000, and I'm calling him to the carpet here a little bit on information he doesn't have, if it's a $50,000 bonus to the fiscal disparity, it's actually a $50,000 net income by raising the levy this amount, but refunding that to the residents. Something to think about.
Yeah, so what he's saying at the end of the day is that we would levy 130, I'll call it 130,000. If fiscal disparities increases 50,000, the net impact that would go to property tax owners would be the delta, or the $80,000 instead of the 130,000. So you're saving collectively overall, and then you're refunding what Councilmember Nordby is talking. Then you would refund all of your electrical users some sort of small amount that would equate to that $130,000. And it's a concept you can definitely look at. I'll say kind of a piece to it. I mean, especially when we start to look at the CIP, and again, I've kept saying how much of a driving force this is. You've heard the city manager just kind of allude to and make a little bit of a mention, about our streets and where we're at, and some more major reconstruction projects that are going to be needed. The one safety net, I'm going to call it, that we have in this city is our electric fund. 2 years ago, we transferred $1.1 million to start advancing our street projects by doing, I guess, a second tier of what we call pavement preservation program. Without that, you wouldn't have been able to get started onto that program. So it's kind of like our only safety net that we have, and we are going to be levying 6% year after year after year after year after year as a base to afford our capital improvement plan. And so, and then whatever other decisions are going to be made. And so we're going to be putting a good burden onto our residents through the property taxes one way or the other, unfortunately. And that's where, the decisions that we make are very critical. So I don't disagree. with your component to it, in what you're saying. So, I mean, it's definitely something we can look at. Usually, we don't get the first blush of fiscal disparities and so forth till like about later August. But that'll be, and then I'll do tax impacts and everything like that for you. But roughly a 6% on a median value home, and home values went up 2.4%. Last year they went up 1.5. That's pretty stagnant in consideration the post-COVID days where we were seeing double digits year after year. So the median value home value is just under $311,000. A 6% levy increase is roughly about $100, is what the 6% would create for a median value home for our residents. So that's not a small amount for our residents to have to absorb year after year. Yeah, so it's a tough place that we're at, but
I remember the story of the one year they didn't raise, they did zero levy, and then that bit us because then we didn't get our fiscal disparities.
Yeah.
It's a 1-2 punch.
it was a 1-2 punch. You don't feel that second punch until the year after.
Yeah, exactly.
And the way in my mind, the way I look at it is, he's talking about $100 increase for that median home. Is there value in making it a $115 increase, but being able to give that home a $20 rebate? So in the end, it saves them $5. That's kind of how my mind works with that rebate versus fiscal disparity. It would charge them more, but with the rebate, in the long run, it should be less.
They wouldn't know what to do with it.
That's the electrical rebate getting through that, right?
Rather than transferring the penalty.
Going back to electric, right? Through the electric bill to get it back. Is that what how to get that back to the,
Yeah, some sort of rebate on their electric bill.
okay. Does everybody have, North St. Paul have, is there any spot that's on NSP, or NSP, I'm going way back, XL or not on underneath North St. Paul?
Do we have customers? Yeah, we have many. There's probably pushing 1,000, we have a decent slice of Oakdale, and then we have some Maplewood customers as well.
But do we have, is there any of our residents that are on
No.
XL?
No.
No.
Okay, I just want to make
No.
sure that we didn't cut a line somewhere where somebody is off and if they're paying North St. Paul, they wouldn't.
Not for the electric, but there's water customers that have Xcel Energy because they serve up into Maplewood.
Okay.
They have Excel, water.
Our water department that serves some residents up in Maplewood get Xcel gas and Xcel power up there from them, yep.
Any other questions right now?
I'm just thinking as a,
Just shoot it out.
just a homeowner, if I had these, if I'm looking at these bills I had, and if I'm looking at what the future looks like, I'd be shoving some nickels in the couch cushions.
Yes.
That's about, we really don't have a lot of extra that, especially if we're asking staff and everybody to, cut and be at the minimum of things, that there's really not a lot of extra that can go through to anything else. And our income, middle to low income, we have a lot of people that are on fixed incomes, a lot of older people too. And like taxes, years ago, $600 with a 6% increase is a lot different than $4,000 people are paying now on top of that, which is, like you say, around your $100 for the,
Yep, yeah, correct, yep.
Plus, we have a lot of TIF
Districts.
apartment districts that haven't started paying in on any of the real estate yet, so.
Yeah, they're not in your tax base yet until they,
I get that a lot for people. They go, oh, look at all these new places, all the taxes they're paying. Well, it's not yet. So it's, you're
We got 20 years ago, or some of 20,
Exactly, you're-
25 years, yeah.
You're betting
Absolutely.
on your future with that. You're not getting it now, but we had to do a lot of construction and things to get to there too.
Absolutely.
That we paid for as a city, so it was not an easy.
Now, can I ask, with that fiber that we're losing from Ramsey, is there a way that we could offer to some other area? Or is it so outdated that it is something that we should look to go into a different menu for fiber now? Or how does that all work? Because I realize it's in the community center. How do we go about offering it to other locations, or is it so outdated that if we did the community center options, we would move it to possibly another location? Is there somewhere we could offer some more fiber to some other locations that could use it, our system?
Well, I'll ask Brian to help me out on this one, but I think from the time the inception of the fiber network, technology has changed so much
Right. No,
that
that's what I'm
it's cheaper to go and find a different alternative for other. The biggest user right now, unfortunately, is the city. So we're utilizing it. So you would have a cost one way or the other for the city. We also have three agreements, Oakdale, Maplewood, and I think Roseville, that, you know, have long-term agreements. We got about 7 or 8 more years with that. They prepaid money up front. They pay maintenance on an annual basis. You know, I certainly would anticipate that at the end of that, their contracts, they would get away, because there's cheaper ways to do it. And I think at that point in time is where you're gonna have to pay up the negative, and you're gonna have to come up with potentially a different plan, alternative, use a different resource onto it. I can't speak to, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong on any of that, but I can't speak to is if there's really any resale value that you see.
There's some. I know Roseville is certainly, or Metro Inet at this point, uses some of that, and then they turn around and then release it out. I know they have needs for it. As far as outdated, I mean, I guess I don't know how technology's changed when the actual fiber strands themselves, but there's probably technology updates in the IT rooms, the way they split it down and break it down. But yeah, there's so many companies putting fiber in out there, and people who do it for a living and have all the infrastructure for it, they're probably gonna find better ways to get it from us at the end of these contracts.
Yeah, depends how many strands are in it and, you know, everything, how they're built.
But there are potentials, and we're actually in the process of talking to one now, a company that might be interested in coming and literally doing fiber to the home. But we have a lot of empty conduit around town that we installed through the electric department. We'd put in the conduit that we need, but we'd also put in a couple of conduits for the potential fiber when once upon a time we were looking at it. And we continued that on for many years after we looked into it. So that has a lot of value. There's only so much real estate, and there's only so much room down there, especially in the road right-of-ways. So that has value as well that we'll be talking to that company about.
So you're figuring probably within 10 years, we're gonna have to pay the Viper on that, more than likely,
Yep.
which is $2 million. Okay.
Simple, yep. Take a look at this 2635 CIP. Again, this is high level. You have all the detail behind it. So it'll talk by the different funding sources. It'll show you each and every year. It'll give you the total. But if you look at it, and this is why I keep saying, because it's really a huge driver, because over 10 years, it's $100 million. And so that's where we really need to spend time to go through that and have city council be comfortable. To fund that, you need to have the street and streets debt increasing at $248,000, $249,000 year after year for 10 years more. Right now, that's a 3.2% levy increase. Parks, if we look at their plan, they have put some additional needs. A lot of them have come from, some have come from the HGA study that was done last year. But to fund that, you would need to increase it $30,000 beginning this year. So their total would be up to 76,000 or almost 1%. And then the asset preservation is 142,000 or 1.8% of the current levy. The asset preservation does not include the $3 million addition that has been talked about from the EAPC consultant regarding community center. That has not been included into this. But as you can see, that totals $467,000. That's a 6% levy increase. It drops down a little bit as a levy increase because your levy keeps getting bigger and bigger, so the percentage goes down. But there's nothing that said that all of the numbers that are within that capital improvement plan are lock solid. And we see costs of equipment and projects continuously going up. So that's kind of where that looks. In addition to that, our internal service fund, we're going to end up having to charge additional charges on our equipment and building maintenance of approximately 5% per year. It's not the huge increase, but for the levy, it would be about a $28,000 increase, or just under 4% levy increase. For non-levy increases, or in other words, our enterprise funds and so forth, would be about a $14,000. Enterprise funds, looking off into the future of rate increases, still need to do some work on that before I present that to City Council. That's everything, all 401 pages. I was thinking that we would do kind of a Senate approach today, and I was going to read each and every single line of those 401, but I decided we'd just do a summary onto it. So it's really to get your thoughts and direction on the budget, and then just because I'm corny, I want to leave kind of just my last slide after this is just a little saying. And to me, there's meaning behind that saying, but I want to leave you with that. But I want to give you an opportunity to ask questions, your thoughts, or your first blush at it, or you're comfortable at that 6%. We've heard the Councilmember Nordby talk about maybe changing that $131,000 transfer to be more of a levy increase. There's also the potential of parks to fund theirs, that you would have to increase the levy $30,000, or that whatever, just a 0.4% levy increase that would be needed. Don't know about the community center, that's still out there. City Council, you have to make decisions onto that coming into the future. So those are still out on the table. Those aren't included in that 6%.
Thank you, Dan. Very good report. Appreciate it. Anybody have any questions?
Okay, now I'm going to leave you with my corny little thought. And it's going to come up here in a second. And the reason behind it is because in the time that I've been here, every time we present the financial statement to City Council, in the time that this gentleman has been our mayor, he asks me the same question about that fiber optics. And I think we can collectively say, don't know how the decision was made. I think there was really good intention, but at the end of the day, it didn't work out. So I leave you with this as a final thing. Your decisions today will define your tomorrow.
That's true. Anybody?
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No pressure at all.
How many years do we have to go?
So I'm just trying to do the math when we're looking at different things and projects where we have that $2 million coming up. We have the $3 million, for the community center plus the ongoing stuff. It's very concerning. There's not a lot, especially when we're already cutting or staying neutral, I guess is pretty much where we're at right now, trying to do it. So I just don't see the numbers.
Trying to hedge against a potential decrease in
Yeah.
government, intergovernmental funding.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to roll down to us. it's gonna be the feds and the state and the county, and then it rolls to us, and then we have to go out to the taxpayers for a lot of it, because that's the only place we can go. We can't grab out anybody else's pockets. Our hands only fit in our own.
Really?
Anybody want to discuss anything else, or as far as, well, we had two great presentations. We had the community center, which was eye-opening. I've received quite a few comments about how, you know, the amount we got to and where things are. And now after today, hopefully, people will be watching and be able to absorb and see where we're at, so we can make some of these tough decisions, because it's gonna be tough decisions coming up for all of us here, where we have to, I mean, our main thing here as a city is infrastructure, you know, roads and public safety. Once we get those three right and good, then we can work our way out to other things. And I still think we have a ways to go on what we're supposed to be doing, so, before we can really focus on some of the other stuff. All right, if nothing else, call for adjournment.
So moved.
So moved. Councilmember Woods.
Second.
Second, Councilmember McKenzie. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan.
You bet.